a leader. Maybe you are thinking about transitioning into a leadership role, or perhaps you are already in a leadership role and you struggle with communicating the right way, in a way that is more influential or persuasive to your teams. This is a great opportunity for you to ask me anything as it relates to leadership communication. Leadership communication is critically important. You will see time and time again how good leaders communicate and how bad leaders communicate, or leaders that are maybe not communicating at the level that they need to be. So if you want to learn more about communicating in a more strategic way as a leader, ask me any questions. What are you struggling with right now as a leader? What are some challenges that you have as a leader in terms of how you're communicating? And let's talk about that today. Now, I do want to mention to you specifically that many leaders, even if they are more seasoned leaders, will struggle with this topic. And we're going to talk a bit more about that later today when I go live, because we're going to dive into leadership, self-leadership, and some of the mistakes and failures that people often make as leaders. So I want to say hello to Kat 23rd. Hello, Kat. Hope you're doing well. Kat says, oh, hey, Doc, you're back. Yes, absolutely, Kat. I am back. And so let me know what questions you all have specifically as it relates to leadership and communication. Kat, I will say this evening, we're going to talk a bit more about some of those self-leadership and communication failures and leadership failures that people make this evening when I go live, when I have a bit more time to talk about it with everyone. There's a couple things that I have seen leaders really struggle with as it relates to communicating. A lot of it has to do with being able to think strategically. Now, you may be wondering, what does thinking strategically have to do with how I communicate? If you're not able to think ahead in terms of what could happen, what may happen, it makes it difficult for you to be able to communicate as a leader effectively. What does this require you to do as a leader? When you are communicating with your teams and having a conversation with your teams, the topic that you are discussing could be something more operational, meaning that you need to deal with an issue, some logistics, a workflow, or something along those lines. Or it may be something that truly does have a lot more of an impact in the future than the present moment. That will be if you're planning to do an expansion. Maybe you're trying to add more individuals to your team. Maybe there's a project you're planning to work on, or a grant you're planning to potentially apply for. So you have to think of it in terms of the conversations you're having with your team. Is it more operational? Is this something in the present moment? Thank you for the heart emojis. Is this something in the present moment that we need to deal with now? Is this a fire, as I call it? Is this a fire? Is this urgent? Is it a matter of someone doing something maybe perhaps a little bit differently in their workflow, or not? If it's something that's going to plan or have extensive planning associated with it, you have to be able to think ahead. If you as a leader are not able to showcase or show a roadmap in terms of this is where we are going as a department, as a business, as an organization, you will not be able to communicate with that to your teams, and your teams will be confused and they will not know exactly what are we doing, why are we doing it, what's the reason for it. And that's the reason why a lot of team members will start to lose trust in their leader, because they feel as if their leader does not know exactly what they're talking about. And if you're subscribed to this channel, you're watching this video, you're watching the replay, you know that is not what I want for you. I want you to be that leader that is able to communicate at a level where it's understood to everyone else. Now, there's a lot of conversation that people have in terms of how should you communicate? What grade level should you communicate at? And many people say you'll need to communicate with people at a 3rd to 4th grade level, depending on your role. Now, if you are in a more highly educated industry, then you may be able to communicate with individuals with more vocabulary or maybe more complex words. But if you're communicating with your teams, make sure you're communicating in a way to where it makes complete sense to them. So if you're talking to someone that's in the 3rd or 4th grade that has some common sense and they somewhat have an idea in terms of, oh, okay, we are doing this project because we're trying to make more money, or we're trying to serve more clients, we're trying to service more patients, and etc. So let me see what came in the chat. Kat said, But sometimes a leader could be misunderstood by his or her team, resulting to the team having cracks. Yes, and a lot of times this will happen if the leader is not clear on how they are communicating, but it goes deeper if they are not clear on what they are doing. Sometimes as leaders, we may not have all the answers and we may not know exactly what we're doing because it's an active situation. It just happened. We're not sure. There's still ways, Kat, that leaders should be able to communicate that. I've been in situations like that so many times where it is really a moving target. And if I, as the leader, can foresee and have that strategic ability to think ahead and say, this situation is constantly moving or it will be constantly moving, then I would let my team know that transparently and say, this is what's going on right now. These are a couple things that could happen because this environment is changing, is volatile, whatever the case may be. There's a possibility that what I tell you may change tomorrow. And if it does, my responsibility is to communicate that with you so that you know what's going on. So a lot of that misunderstanding, Kat, will come up if the leader is not clear in terms of what's going on or what they need to say. But the way to counteract that is to just tell your team this is what's going on. Things are not clear. They're not as if they're in the best situation as they should be, but this is what we're going to do to work with the information that we have. That helps to prevent a lot of misunderstandings and prevent those cracks. Because Kat, you bring up such a good point. I have seen this happen time and time and time again, where people are misunderstood and they don't know what's going on. The team starts to develop those cracks, as you mentioned, and they don't really know what to do or what's going on because the leader is not clear. And sometimes, as I mentioned, we are not clear because we may have information that's not, it may not be at the point where we're ready to discuss it just yet. We may just not be sure in terms of, well, what exactly is going on? I don't know what's going on. We don't have a crystal ball to know everything, but we try to at least share what we can that's appropriate to help everybody. All right, so Kat says, for example, not having answers to everything while the team is expecting you to be able to be present. Leadership roles sometimes can be heavy when you are working with impatient teammates. Yes, it can be, but it's a matter of how you internalize that stress. Because if you as a leader are dealing with people that are impatient, the key is just to communicate with them. And in addition to communicating with them, find out what's the big issue. It may be something that they are very impatient about, where you may be able to find a solution for it pretty quickly. Now, you may not be able to address the big picture that's going on, but there may be just a small aspect of it that is stressing them out. So, for example, if you know you are going to plan for, let's say, a large expansion in your business or in your organizations, there's a big project that you're working on. You know the big project is taking place. There's a lot of moving parts with it. Maybe you're finding another building. You're trying to secure another building. Maybe there's some partners you have to work with, some investors you're working with, and etc. There's a lot of things that come into play as it relates to that. Your coworkers or your team members may be really impatient because they just don't know what's going to happen when they go into this new building. They're just terrified. They just don't know what's going to happen. Well, what you can do is, if they are not sure about what's going to happen when they get into the building, you still have the big picture. You still have the big picture that's going on. A lot of other parts that they don't necessarily need to worry about. But perhaps you can have a conversation with the team and say, tell me a little bit about what your concerns are, and I'll share with you what will be some good solutions for us to think about, or some solutions we can come up together to alleviate everyone's concerns, and talk to them that way. I have found that a lot of times the team members are impatient with the details, with the very, 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 very specific details that impact their everyday functioning in their roles. If you can address those details, even though you have the big picture going on, it gives your team the ability to say, oh, okay, I know we don't know all this yet, but specifically for this one issue that we're dealing with, we can start doing A, B, and C. There's always room to communicate. There's always a lot of dialogue that needs to happen as leaders to make sure we're communicating with everyone. Okay, Kat says, at school we had encounter like that where our assignment leader was misunderstood and resulted to a slow build of teamwork because there was no direction until we talked it out and pointed the issue. Exactly. And one thing that leaders sometimes fail to realize is that it takes a team to figure things out sometimes. The leader doesn't have to be the person that just has all of the answers to everything. I believe in having a collaborative team to have a conversation to discuss specifically what's going on and what are the challenges. And as the leader, your role is to moderate the conversation, determine what can we work on, what are some things that we may not be able to work on, and thank you for the heart emojis, and what are some aspects of this that we probably need to have more of a discussion on. So I appreciate you bringing that point up, Kat. And you brought up a really good scenario. The leader was misunderstood and it slowed everyone down. Why was the leader misunderstood? There was no direction. And that's one of the reasons why that strategic foresight or the ability to think strategically is so critically important. Because if you can't think ahead, how can you tell your team what to do? They can't follow the leader if the leader doesn't know where we're going. And that's really, really important to do. Now, later this evening, we'll talk a bit more about leadership and leadership failures. I'm going to take some time and come up with some failures that I've seen a lot of leaders make so that you don't make those mistakes. And if you're a woman in leadership and you're at the point where you're trying to transition into these roles, maybe you're struggling a bit with thinking strategically as it relates to your organizations, your business, and moving forward, then contact me for an executive strategy session at exciteexcellence.org and let's set up time so we can help you be successful. I will see you all later this evening in the next video. Bye for now.